Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Mike and Wendy. It's Monday, and you're in the Marriage Shop. Welcome. Um, Long time no see.
Yeah, so we hope you had a great weekend and ready to start your week off just right. So it's Monday. Hopefully, those of you that went back to work today had a great Monday and you're looking forward to this week. Did you hear something?
I did. Need you to focus. Come on. Come on.
So anyway, we're glad you're joining us tonight. So if you were with us last week, we have, committed to doing our second Mondays for singles. And we're always glad when you guys show up. So we talked about that first year of marriage, right? So we just kind of skipped past. I mean, if you're single, maybe you just got married or you're considering it. But what is it about marriage? And that was really prompted by a question that we had received while we were in Chattanooga, which was, is the first year of marriage as bad as people say it is or as bad as it seems? So anyway, so we talked about that, the first year of marriage, confusion or what was it?
See,
confirmation or confusion.
I knew you were going to say that, right? Confirmation or confusion.
Yes.
I mean, and bottom line for me, us, I'm going to say us.
Yeah.
Marriage, first year was awesome.
Yeah.
It was great. And there are probably a lot of reasons why some of the things that people struggle with. I think we didn't struggle with until year 2 or 3 because we were around Korea just going crazy and traveling and all that.
Yeah.
Then we came home. And,
right.
And so, but I mean, I still think it was all right.
I mean, we had a few challenges. We had some tough challenges in our first year of marriage, for sure. And we were able to really kind of endure those things together. And I think that really served to solidify our relationship beyond that. I mean, before we got married, you had a death in the family. right after we got married, we were traveling overseas and then separated. We had another death in the family in that first year. Then my father got sick.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we had a miscarriage. And we moved. Lots of challenge, all in the first year.
Yeah.
I mean, we got it all in.
Yeah.
So it can be challenging. Two different people, two different backgrounds, two families coming together, but there's hope and it can get better. So that was last week.
But it can be better. It can get better. But I need to say it can be great. It can be amazing. For a lot of people, it is amazing. For us, there were a lot of external events at play. Yeah. But it can be amazing. I'm just saying. Anywho.
Yeah.
Let's
so
say hey
Camilla Freeman. Yeah.
What's up,
Camilla Freeman, Jessica Jones, Alprentice Smith.
Jessica Jones, Alprentice Smith.
Yes. What? Playing for envelopes.
What's up, Coach?
Yes. Hey, and Gerald Wilson. Glad you guys are joining us pretty early here in the Marriage Shop tonight.
What's up, fam? How you doing, Gerald Wilson?
Yeah, yeah. So for those of you who just really want to know, it's raining in Evans.
Nicolette.
I just wanted to make sure I got that in there. But we're hey, the Raiders won.
The Raiders did win.
2-0.
Cowboys won. Alabama won. Nicolette, congratulations. I mean, is that news? Anyway, I see Lori Ann is here.
Yeah. And Brendan is here. We're glad
Good
you're
evening.
in the shop. Yeah. So thanks guys for dropping in.
Love y'all.
Yeah, this topic tonight, you know what? You want to talk about it? What are we talking about?
Other than the Cowboys?
Yeah.
I don't even know. No. So tonight we're talking about distance, right? In the context of marriage, that can mean a lot of things.
Yeah.
It could mean separation. It can mean a little bit of time and space. But we're talking about distance and whether or not that's something that's necessary, whether it's helpful, whether it's harmful or not. And so we're gonna talk a little bit about that because a lot of people, a lot of couples, most couples have some times when maybe a little bit of air is required in order for you to come back and to get where you're trying to go to resolve that issue, right? So we're going to talk about it a little bit tonight because I think it's important. I don't believe that there's a couple out there, certainly none that I've met, where they haven't, taken a little bit of time. The question is how much time, and maybe a little space. How much space? Yeah. So.
Yeah. So you say you don't know any couples that haven't taken a little bit of time.
Yeah.
But we're not talking about separation.
Well, we're talking about time and space. So that exists on a continuum.
Yeah.
Right. And so if you've ever needed a minute, just say yes in the chat. That's all. Just say yes if you ever needed a minute, whether that's, many minutes, just a second to take a breath. But if you've ever been in a conflict and ultimately when we're talking about the type of time and space we're talking about tonight, it's in the context of conflict. Something is, it's getting intense. Maybe it's getting heated. Maybe you're frustrated, whatever. And you've needed maybe to take a minute, maybe get your thoughts together, maybe just take some time and take a breath. If you've ever needed that, just say yes in the chat.
Yeah.
Right. Kel Glass, what's up, man?
Yeah.
Hey, congrats on that business too, bro. We'll be visiting at some point. All right. So go ahead.
Ron Harvey said Miami won. Is that true?
Miami what?
The Dolphins. He said the Dolphins won.
Maybe it was the Canes because the Dolphins got drugged all over their own stadium. So that's another story.
Yeah, I didn't think they won. I just wanted to check in with you. Hey, Jessica, glad you could join us and looking forward to your book signing event that you have coming up. Congratulations to you again. Andrea, glad you could be in the house.
What's up, sis?
Yes.
Long time no see. I tried to call you. All right. But anyway, both of them lost. See, Ron's not watching sports. Stop it, Ron. Stop trying to antagonize people. Anyway, but so I'm seeing a lot of yeses in the chat, right?
Yeah.
Because, it's natural to need some time, right? It's not necessarily a bad thing to need a little time from time to time when things get intense, because a lot of times when we just stay in something and it's very, it's a challenging conversation.
Yeah.
It's not uncommon to say some things maybe that we might regret or some things that we don't necessarily mean. But when your emotions get turned up, sometimes you say some things that you don't necessarily mean.
Yeah. Right? So let's do this. Let's start at the on the light end of the continuum.
Okay.
So in terms of needing some time, some space, let's just start with disagreement or argument, right? And
Okay.
in that taking a little bit of time either to take a deep breath, to walk it off, to process your thoughts. We're talking minutes to maybe an hour or two, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just some time to just kind of cool down. So you said in response to an argument or something, right? Argument, disagreement, we're just not seeing eye to eye and we're not able to move forward. So, you call a timeout, you go to your respective corners, bell rings, break it up, go to your respective corners and kind of regroup, right? I think every couple that I know, married or not married, has had an opportunity to do that for sure, right?
Yeah,
that where you just need to, we're just kind of button heads, right?
Yeah.
And that, can we just agree to disagree stuff? It just doesn't work sometimes in that moment. So we totally get that. I think everybody has experienced that.
Yeah, and I guess, and you mentioned, maybe a couple of minutes, maybe a couple of hours, but y'all feel free. You also can start kind of chopping it up in the chat a little bit.
Yeah.
What might require that time? Because everything doesn't, right? I mean, sometimes you can go ahead and you can. Kel said, "I don't argue." So Kel, if you don't argue, that means one or two things: either you don't talk, or she doesn't talk, or then somebody is not being honest. That's all I'm saying. I'm only saying that to you direct, Kel, because you're my boy and I can say that straight up, kind of sort of to you, right? But nevertheless, what requires that? When do you hit a situation when it's time maybe to take a breath, step back, and come back? All right, because there are sometimes you mentioned, we're talking and we're getting nowhere, and we've been in those situations where we are both trying to make our point. We're both trying to, I don't know. I mean, maybe we're both trying to be right.
Yeah, I think we're both trying to be heard.
We're not reaching agreement. That's good. Yeah, maybe we're both trying to be heard.
Yeah, more so than trying to be right.
Maybe you're trying to be heard and I'm trying to be right.
Yeah, that's probably right. You're trying to be right and I'm trying to be heard.
Yeah.
And it just isn't happening. And it can get extremely frustrating. And so to prevent it from escalating or becoming, to prevent it from escalating, becoming more serious, or like you said, saying something that you might regret, then we will often just kind of, with intention, just kind of leave each other's presence in that moment. And so that doesn't mean get in the car and roll. It just means, hey, maybe go to another room in the house.
Yeah, that's what it tends to mean for us.
Yeah, and that's what we're talking about.
And I think even sometimes it's not even necessarily about bringing the heat down. I think sometimes it's about reconsidering the conversation.
Yeah.
At least that's what it becomes, because when that time and that space is there, I'm reflecting on what I'm saying. Right now, that will tend to go one or two ways. Either A, I'm picking apart everything I've heard and I'm like, okay, she's wrong about this, she's wrong about that. I didn't do that. I didn't say that. Here's what, or where did this thing go left? Where did she mess this up? All right, and I'm trying to think of that. I mean, I'm just being real. Or I'm thinking about how it got to how it got and where it is I'm stuck and why I'm stuck there. Right. Because if I can get to that place, then I can sometimes help myself get unstuck. If I'm trying, I'm in that space where I'm trying to be most of the time, right? Where I'm trying to be forgiving and I'm trying to have some grace and I'm trying to check myself. Sometimes I'm there too, but whatever the case, I tend to be in all those places, depending on the day. But whatever the case, that time, the hope is that time is spent with the intention of coming back. Right now, truth be told, and full transparency, I don't know about y'all, but I don't know that we certainly don't always establish, okay, we're going to come back at a certain time at this time.
Yeah.
And in fact, for some of you, that time may drag.
Yeah.
It certainly has for us, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think to Kel's point, right? Often in relationships, there may be one person who is intent on solving the issue right now, right? And so they will continue to pursue it, right? They come to you, they bring the issue to you, and they want to push through the conversation no matter how difficult, painful, frustrating it is.
Yeah.
And then there may be the other person who says, hey, I'm not for arguing. I'm not for conflict. I would just rather say what we have to say. And then if it's necessary, let's just walk away while everything is still good. That those two things can exist. And sometimes that is the case. Sometimes it's a case of two people who just have to just go at it. No matter what, it's relentless. We are going to try to make this thing work. We're going to talk through it. We're going to continue to pursue this conversation, no matter how bad it gets. I mean, it just depends. You know what situation you're in, and you should know your spouse or the person you're in a long-term committed relationship with well enough to know how they're going to come at it.
Well, I mean, yeah, I think ultimately it's that piece is about, some level of agreement, right? Some couples have agreed, you know what, we're going to stay here. We're going to grind this thing out until we work it out, right? Some have said, if we need a minute, we're going to take a minute. Some haven't had a conversation about it at all.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times the folks who have not had a conversation about it at all are the ones who tend to either stay in there too long or stay away too long. Right. So how much space is enough space? How much time is enough time?
Yeah.
I think that what tends to happen is that when there's no conversation about coming back to this thing, and you might be the couple who have decided, we're gonna take some time. I need time. I need my space. Right.
Yeah.
If there's been no conversation about it, and you don't have a tendency to intentionally come back to it, next thing you know, time has passed. And then what? How much time is too much?
Yeah. I mean, and I think that's good. One of the things that we advise is that if you have to take some time away or you need to decompress or whatever it is, if you say, hey, time out, I just need a break, that you come back to it, that you do establish that time. So something for you guys to talk about this week. If your tendency is to shut down or shy away or whatever in the midst of a disagreement or argument or conflict, then work on establishing a time to reconvene, right? When are we going to come back? When are we going to re-enter this conversation? When are we going to continue from where we stopped?
Okay. All right, baby. So, so your role, but since you're there, I wouldn't say work on it. I would say decide that that's what you're going to do. Talk about it like tonight, today. Decide what you're going to do.
Yeah.
Right? Come to an agreement on that. And then that will insert some accountability to that thing. But decide today, hey, if we get into it and we can't resolve it, let's take this amount of time, something finite, something specific. All right. We're going to get into why that is as we proceed tonight. All right.
Yeah. So thanks for dropping your comments in there too. So Lori says, thank goodness for the guest room in her house. It gives her time to decompress and rethink, which I think, a lot of us can benefit from. So thank you for sharing that. Nicolette says, if we walk away, things tend not to get resolved. Thank you for sharing that. That can also be the case, especially if you don't agree to come back to it. Then Lisa says, I tend to want to talk about it now. I know if it lingers, we may never get back to it, but often I have to let it sit so he can process before I try to force him to talk. And I love the way that you describe that, right? Really how you're on two different sides of it. And it is true. And the point that I was making is, your spouse, your significant other, your partner, that person, and what they need. And so the interesting thing is often when we get into disagreements or fights or whatever you want to call it, conflicts, despite the fact that we know how that other person usually is in the moment, we don't care. So I think it is good that you said to set a time and you know how much time you need.
Yeah. And I would suggest that some folks don't know what their spouse needs. And you know who you are. Some of y'all do. I mean, you don't know. I mean, I used to think I knew, right? I used to think I knew because there was a point in time that I figured it out, right? Maybe we talked about it.
Yeah.
And then you live a little life and discover what you knew yesterday is just not the same.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so, I think it's important to kind of always be willing to come back and ask questions. Right. Maybe it's the same question. Maybe you will get what I get from Wendy from time is like, did I not answer that question last year?
Yeah.
And that's okay, right? Because things change.
Yeah,
right?
Things do change. So I like Jessica, thanks for dropping that in there. So we do essentially what we're talking about is establishing some ground rules, rules of engagement. So she says that establishing rules for fighting fair or disagreement conversations is helpful. Like before a boxing match, the rules are made clear ahead of time, which is honestly easier said than done. It's true because we can lay out our plans, but as soon as emotions get tapped, all of a sudden some of that goes out of the window. And we know that to be true, which is why we invite you to have this conversation, like you said, before the next disagreement.
Yeah. And so, and if you're in one right now, go ahead and press pause and have that conversation.
Yeah.
Because we're talking about distance because distance can be a problem. Right. And how does it happen? First, it can be, well, we're going to take a few minutes. Then it's like, well, you know what? I'm going in here. I'm going to go to my space. Right. Then maybe it's, how long you do that? Maybe, a couple hours, maybe this evening. Maybe we don't talk for the rest of the night. Maybe we don't talk for the rest of the week unless it's absolutely essential. If you've been there, you know what I'm talking about, right? Where you just do the bare minimum, and you might throw in that obligatory "I love you" on the phone calls just in case.
Yeah.
But go days maybe without talking, right? Or maybe you take off and go somewhere. Where you going? Out. You just go, right? And so you need some time, right? And so maybe you spend your time wherever you spend it, driving around, at a bar, at work. And maybe you extend that time a little further than you would have because you don't feel like getting back into that conversation. Maybe you're angry and you don't feel like getting back into that conversation. So you spend a little bit more time doing whatever it is you're doing so you don't have to get back into that conversation.
Well, I think you bring up a good point, right? So you talked about going to my space, and the challenge is, as all of us endured the pandemic over the last year and a half, you may have had your space, but then your space disappeared because we were all together for an extended period of time and there was no space to go to. And I can tell you, based on what we observed, a whole lot of people started walking. We saw a lot of people outside during the pandemic. And that's still not a bad idea because sometimes when you're in the throes of a heated conversation, what you need is more oxygen to your brain. So it may not be a bad idea to just take a walk. Take a lap around the block and come back. Go outside and get some fresh air. If you don't have an in-law suite or a cottage or somewhere else that you can go, just step outside for a few minutes just to kind of cool down. So I said we were going to start on one end, on the light end of the spectrum, and then kind of move over. So you kind of took us into a little bit more or longer term separation is something a little bit more definitive. So thanks guys for dropping some of these comments in too. So Jessica says, we often know what we want to give and what we expect. Taking time to continue to pursue the knowledge of your partner, we grow and change. Yeah, thank you for that. And that's one of the things that we share often, right? We are continual students of our spouses. Things change is what you said. And so it is necessary to kind of check back in. Kel says, talking is not arguing. Arguing is not talking. If it gets to the point that we start arguing, I walk away until we are ready to talk. That's good. That's good. I mean, and again, that's kind of how you operate in that, right? Thank you for sharing that because that's true for a lot of people. You got something to say on that?
Well, I just want to say he ain't wrong, right? But I think a lot of people, and I don't want y'all to get too caught up in semantics tonight, because when we talk about arguing, and some people use the word fighting and disagreeing. A lot of times we're talking about the same types of conversations. How we characterize those is different, and so important for us to frame this up tonight. We're talking about that conversation where it's not working. Maybe it has gotten to the point where this is a non-productive conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody decides, you know what? Can't do this right now.
Yeah.
Right. So whatever gets you to that point, because some people get to that point before there's even an exchange. Perhaps you hear something that it pushes your button and you're like, you know what? Not doing it.
Mm-hmm.
I have nothing to say to you right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And so whatever that thing is that gets you to the point where the conversation is no longer productive and you decide some time is necessary.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, and I think it's also important to emphasize that we're not talking about abusive situations, right? I'm not talking about if you're getting abused or beat up.
Yeah.
To be quite honest, right? Because that requires separation right now.
Yeah.
And we've talked about that a little bit, but I just want to be clear that there's no expectation that you stick around to get to be abused, to be hurt and harmed.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
That's good. I mean, so on the one end of the spectrum are the disagreements or those minor conflicts that you have that, sure, it is recommended that maybe you take a break or you get a breath of fresh air, but that before you do that you agree to come back together. And so I saw that Andrea says, can't that harbor distrust? Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, did you want to say something?
And I said, maybe I'm good.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it just depends, right? Because I think if in the way that I think that you wrote it, there's this whole idea of if the person always just kind of takes off, right? With no word, no indication of when they're leaving or where they're going or when they're coming back. Absolutely. That can harbor some distrust, but I don't want to read into what you wrote. But yeah, it's what? What are you laughing at?
No, go ahead. You you can't, go ahead. You ready to do it? Go ahead, read. Speak.
Yes. So, okay. So she wrote in there a little bit more extended breaks without disclosure of where breaks are being taken. Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. I mean, especially if the amount of time away when the person is taking a break begins to extend incrementally as you described, right? So maybe it's an hour the first time, maybe it's 2 hours, maybe they stay gone all night. And in a situation like that, then admittedly, when you come back together, there's going to be even more stuff that maybe adds to the conflict that started in the first place.
Yeah, well, I think, the question that everybody needs to ask themselves, when you're taking this time, mm-hmm. What are you taking time to do exactly? Mm. What are you taking time to do? Mm-hmm. What is the point of the time that you're taking? Like, what's happening in that space? Mm-hmm. Because I think that's really important. Mm-hmm. Whatever that time is, I don't know, taking off and just disappearing.
Yeah.
We tend to not be like just definitive on a whole lot of stuff. We tend to just like lay down. But I can't think of a circumstance where it's okay mm-hmm. to just disappear, right? Because that can breed, if not distrust. There's nothing. There's an absence of information, right? And I think that's it's not fair to do to somebody, even when you're angry, right? Yeah. So I think it's important though to consider, what are you doing with that time?
Yeah. And essentially overall, that's what we should talk about, right? Mm-hmm. In terms of this whole idea of separation. So there's the light end, and we're kind of moving towards something that's a little bit more extended periods of time. And then you can get to a place where a couple can agree that they need to separate for the sake of their marriage or their relationship or their children, mm-hmm. like separate for an extended period of time. Like, you need to move out.
Is that helpful? I'm asking y'all. Mm-hmm. Is that something that you believe mm-hmm. is helpful, or can be helpful?
Yeah,
I'm curious as to what you all think. And we're gonna be, if you read the intro piece for this, then we're gonna be talking about this again next week. And in fact, we're gonna have a couple of folks on to talk about this very topic. Well, we hope to have a couple of folks on. Oh, we're gonna have somebody on. So, so listen, if you actually want to join us in that conversation, we'll bring you in live. That is virtually, but live. Let us know. and we're going to do that. So yeah, just DM us
for part 2, because so we can only share from some of what has been shared with us, and then our own experiences. And in our experience and in our marriage, we've never separated for an extended period of time. So our separation has been limited to maybe going to another room or taking a walk or a drive around the block for a short period of time. There have been periods of time when we've been separated geographically, but not by choice, right? And so for a job or training or something that was occurring that caused that separation. So we're not talking about that. We're talking about when you make a decision to leave or separate for a period of time. I think it's also important to note that even those of you that have read our book, and then of course that know our story, even during the hardest and most difficult times of our marriage and our challenges, we didn't sleep in separate rooms. We didn't sleep in separate beds. And I think that I just wanted to add that in there because our perspective on that is limited. So we sit squarely in, well, what is the Perry's experience? Yeah. We want to know what your experience is. If there's someone, if you're in a relationship and you and your spouse separated for a period of time and you came out on top of it, just DM us and we want to talk about it and talk about it with everybody. If you separated in a previous relationship and it didn't work out, we want to hear from you too.
Yep, no doubt. Yep. And part of the reason why we never slept in separate rooms, I think it was intentional, in part because we've both kind of seen what distance does, and so as difficult as it has been, as it was, I should say, we still and honestly, Wendy decided she was going to still do that. Yeah. Right. I mean, that's what it was. Right. Yeah, and so, but I think, for us, it was really important because when there is and I asked that question, by the way, what do you do during that time when you are separated, if that's what you decided to do? Yeah. Because you will find that when there is time and when there is space, things begin to encroach and enter into that space. And if you're not very thoughtful and intentional about what you're doing with that time and space, all of a sudden it can become kind of a problem. And so you all know, we'll drop a scripture for you all from time to time. And tonight I offer for you Ephesians chapter 4. The verse is 26 and 27, really. This is the one that most of you probably have heard of, be angry and do not sin verse, right? Be angry and do not sin. This is verse 26. Do not let the sun go down on your anger. Yeah. 27 says, and give no opportunity to the devil, right? And in the context of marriage and space, and this whole idea of being angry and not sinning and not letting the sun go down, resolving things quickly, I think it's about space. It's about when there's a void there, what fills the void, right? What fills the void? Because most of you probably know there are a number of things that are just kind of waiting to fill that void. Yeah. People, for example.
Yeah, but even before people, your own thoughts, right?
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think before people, your own thoughts can invade that space, right? And then you can rationalize and reconcile some things only listening to yourself in that space. But yeah, go ahead. People.
Yeah, people. And so who are those people? Yeah. Right? Yeah. Because if I'm not talking to my spouse, generally I'm talking to somebody, right? So who are those people? Yeah. Those people could be family members, right? Who are in your ear. They may be telling you things that are helpful. They may be telling you things that are harmful, right? There may be old relationships, old friends, right? Who, maybe they're there to support you, quote unquote, right? There may be new friends who are there to support you and support, quote unquote, right? And so oftentimes something's going to fill the void, right? And if we're not actively filling it with, I believe, like the word and talking to our spouse, trying to bring things back together, then other things begin to threaten, right? That's where those opportunities might come in. And so is distance sometimes necessary to some people take that time and that distance and come out in good shape? Yeah, they do. But those people, I would bet, are actively doing some things to ensure that they are moving toward one another, right? So, but time and space, particularly as it begins to prolong, could be problematic.
Yeah. And so I think the key here is if you decide to separate for a period of time where, and we're talking, let's say more than 3 days, right? And you're in two different spaces. The counsel that you seek during that time and what you decide to work on is critical, right? And that you decide to work on it, because we know that people will sometimes separate with no intention of actually focusing on whatever the issue was, right? And if that is the case, if we can't work on what was broken, then we can't work to heal it, right? And so it won't just happen on its own. It requires some intentionality. And so, when we talk about, and we've said this before, you want to seek the guidance and the wisdom of someone who is for your marriage, right? Not just for you in that situation. Because if you're only seeking out people that are for you, team you, then they may side with you, and both of y'all will be wrong.
That's actually good. Because somebody who is siding with you is not necessarily doing you a favor, right? But if they are siding with your marriage, then there's a certain way that looks. But I want to be careful too, because we're talking about a day, 3 days, couple. Look, you can jack your marriage up in an hour,
True.
right? And so the time is, there's amount of time that's too long, right? And that may differ depending on who we're talking about. But what happens during that gap, I think, is really critical.
Yeah.
And if the marriage is the most important thing, then that gap shouldn't be too long, right? And so I think a lot of us are, we get caught up in our feelings, and we want to wait until we're not in our feelings. We want to wait until maybe she'll come around. She'll say I'm right. Maybe that's not exactly the goal, right?
Yeah.
Maybe the goal is to get to the place where we are what we pray about often, right? Forgiving quickly, right? And being able to go back and get to a place where, I can accept you for the person that you are, and forgive you for whatever it is I'm holding against you, and maybe, or seek some forgiveness for what I've done. A lot of times I will seek forgiveness, not even, when I sometimes I feel like I'm right. But I'll ask for forgiveness because I let the conversation drag out too long. Just battling a battle that's not winnable, that really doesn't do anything. Winning it doesn't do anything to enhance our marriage, doesn't do anything to make us better.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it's, you just got to recognize when it's time to pull up. Right. And so, but some people don't pull up. And so it's the distance prolongs.
Yeah.
Right.
And so here's the thing, right? If you're newly married, or you're considering marriage, or you've been married for a long time, on either side of it, the thing is, there's going to be conflict. There are going to be times where you're going to disagree, that you're going to have arguments, or contentious conversations, however you want to categorize it. There's going to be conflict. And the whole idea is that you recognize, you mentioned being in your feelings, but that you recognize that sometimes it's going to be rough. Sometimes it's going to be hard. Sometimes you're going to be frustrated. Sometimes you're going to be disappointed. Sometimes you're going to disagree. However, it should not be an option to just say, I don't like this. My feelings are hurt. I don't like the way this makes me feel, and I'm out. Right. And the reason why I say that way is because I think, especially now, I think we're too quick to just say, this is not what I signed up for. And we're looking for an exit or an easy way out. And the truth is, there's no easy way out. And even when, I said that we stayed in the same room, we stayed in the same bed. There are times when we have arguments now about lesser things where we're in the same bed, but we're both hanging on to our end. Right. There is no, and as much as it pains either one of us, somebody eventually makes an effort to stretch a toe over there or a finger. Like it's the least amount of contact possible. We've been in that place too, and we understand that.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I would suggest to you that having to leave the home, right? Having to like be separated at all is a problem. Right? Now I know, and we're trying to give some space here because we know that this is something that people go through all the time.
Yeah.
And people are going through it right now. Some of y'all watching right now may be in different places, right? Physically different spaces than your spouse, right? But leaving is a problem because what it suggests is that one of us, sometimes both of us, are unwilling to put down whatever that point is for the sake of the marriage. And so I need to be away from you for a few days. If you think about that, right? Well, that in and of itself can be a real issue.
Yeah.
When I talk to the fellas all the time about what it is to love your wife like Christ loved the church, what it is to sacrifice, right? Not sacrificing on the cross, but sacrificing all these little everyday things and being willing to do what's required to ensure that the family is protected. Because once you, again, like the word also says, two are better than one, for they not only receive a good return for their work, right? But when one falls down, the other can help the other up, right? There's protection in being connected. There is ultimate connection in being connected with God at the center, right? Yeah. So when we pull that apart, the protection is gone, right?
Yeah.
And then now we're at risk. And so I would suggest to you that even when things are tense, even when you disagree profoundly, you are better and stronger and more able to come out of that together than you are apart.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. And I think that, I'm not sure who needs that reassurance. But we know that we all need to be encouraged, right? Because there are some days and some times where it just feels like this perpetual argument will never end. Like we will always be in this place. We will never be able to get past this. We will never be able to see eye to eye. And when you are discouraged in that way, it can just strain the stress and the strain of enduring in that way is not what God intended for marriage. God did not create marriage for you to endure it. He created it for you to thrive in it, right? We believe that we're brought together and that we're better together because that's the way that God intended for it to be. That, as you mentioned in the scripture that you shared, right? Life is easier when we're on the same accord. If we can't be on one accord, we need to at least be in the same place, right? And this can be challenging. So we kind of take you from some light stuff to some heavier stuff, right? But there's also the point where if you have reached a point in your relationship and you've said, we just cannot share the same space, we can't be in the same space, we have to separate for the good of everyone, then I would highly recommend that you seek assistance or help outside of yourselves. When you recognize that you're not able to resolve it between you, bring in some help.
Yeah. And that is, if there are a lot of signals that you might need help, but that's unequivocal, right? Need some help. One other thing I'll say on separating, right? There's one thing that is, I think, really important in marriage that helps you to endure difficult times, right? And that's this covenant relationship you're supposed to have, that we're supposed to have in marriage, right? This relationship that exists no matter what, right? No matter what happens, we are one.
Yeah.
Period. You have to have that level of assurance because once you separate, right, what comes in a lot of times? Well, doubt, right? It doesn't feel very safe to be living in different places. there can be a lot of doubt, right? There can be some questioning. And once there's questioning and doubt, that begins to disrupt this covenant you have, this no matter what, because now we've taken a step that, we got like kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out. And there can be a lot of fear and a lot of anxiety around whether or not we're going to be okay.
Yeah.
We can disagree on whatever we're disagreeing on, but there can be no question about whether or not you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
That our relationship is going to make it, right? And so, I think it's important to try to do everything you can to join together. And so if you've decided that, it's so bad you can't be in the same place, it's time for help like right now.
Yeah. And so, you guys are dropping some good comments in the chat, and I love, somebody said happy wife, happy life. And then someone else came back and said happy spouse, happy house.
What's happiness got to do with it?
Yeah. The whole idea though is, fundamentally coming back to a couple of things. So we said at the top that, if you decide to separate, even if it's for a few minutes, that you come to an agreement on when you're going to come back together. So that's one thing, right? Continue to talk, continue to communicate, and continue to make an effort to come back together. So it's not just we agree when we're going to come back. It is while we're gone, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to work on it. This is what I'm going to do. This is what you're going to do during that time that you're separated, whether that's minutes or days. The other thing is recognizing when the problem is bigger than you, right? When is the amount of time or space that you have decided to separate? When is it too much, right? And when can you recognize that you need more help than just what the two of you can get yourselves out of? All of those things come to mind. So those are just some things as we go forward and you talk about your ground rules for your relationship. We challenge you, have the conversation and establish that that no man and no thing will separate you from your spouse. Put that challenge out there this week. Look each other in the eye and say that there is nothing that will come between us.
So, that's good. And so if you decide you need a few minutes like apart, this is what I want you to do. And if you're considering leaving the house, before you leave the house, it's what I want you to do, right? I want you to not focus on what you're arguing about. I want you to maybe do a little bit of a self-check. All right. And so what do I mean? I want you to use Galatians 5:22 through 23. I'm actually going to just drop that in the chat.
Okay.
Because this is one thing I want you to ask yourself, are these the things that I'm exhibiting right now? Not are these what I'm getting, but are these what I'm demonstrating? Right.
Yeah.
So I'm going to put that.
And so a couple of good comments as Mike types that into the comments for you. A couple of good comments that you have in there. So Camilla says it's probably easier to be tempted when you are alone too, right? Yes, exactly. And that really kind of goes back to that scripture in Ephesians, right? Because you become more vulnerable. So the two of you are better together. And as soon as you separate, you become vulnerable and both of you are at risk. And it's not just at risk for, the wrong kind of guidance or other people stepping in. You absolutely can be tempted in those moments because there's always someone, something, whether emotionally or physically, ready to comfort you. And that's not like a threat. That's just what it is, right? It's just reality. We tend to believe that people closest to us and people that love us want what's best for us, which is why I was careful to mention that you want to make sure that you are seeking guidance from someone who wants what's best for both of y'all, right? For the relationship, for the marriage, because that can be critical at that time. Ron also dropped in here. He says he's struggling with what makes me feel like I need space.
I need to hear more from you on that one, bro. It's exactly what the nature of what you're asking. But I need to say, that whole idea of temptation, right? I mean, a lot of people are like, I wouldn't do X, Y, and Z, right? And so temptation comes in a lot of forms, and that slow crawl from where you are to ending up somewhere that's out there often happens incrementally in these small little spaces, right? I allowed some space in our marriage, that years ago, in terms of the book, we wrote about it a little bit. I allowed some space there. And so that space didn't begin with, hey, you know what? I think I'm gonna throw this marriage away today.
Right.
It really wasn't that. It was like, I'm gonna take me some time. Right. And I'm gonna take a little bit more time. And and next thing you know, where there is time, if I'm not feeling it with God and not feeling it with Wendy, things just find their way into your time. And so then it's like, well, one conversation, what's that gonna hurt? Don't hurt anything. Right. And so it's really important that we focus on the things that we say are important, that we focus on the person that we say is the most important person in our lives.
Yeah.
Right.
I think an important question too, and we'll wait on Ron to kind of elaborate on it a little bit. But an important question is, in situations like this, we often are quick to blame the other person, right? It's your fault. You are pushing me away. And I guess the question I would say is it your spouse that's driving you away, or is it you? And as you kind of examine that, right, are you choosing to distance yourself? Are you choosing to separate or create more distance, and blaming your spouse? Is it your spouse or is it you? Or as someone dropped in the comments, is it something that's not even related to either one of you, right? There's something else that has crept in that is forcing the two of you to be at odds or in separate spaces, mentally, physically, emotionally, right? Our job in marriage is to continually work to close the gap. Right? Yeah. That's what it's all about. If we're not doing anything else, everything that we're doing, that we're saying, that we're thinking should be to actively close the gap so that there is no space and we reduce any vulnerability, right? That we prevent any breaches, and that we fortify what we have. So it's the closer we are together, then the farther everything else is from us, if that makes sense. So yeah, let me see. So a couple of comments in there. So Jessica says, for sure, we have to regularly check on where we are. Some days I'm emotional and get petty. And I like that you're saying that and you're being transparent about it. We talked about binging or cringing a couple of weeks ago, and I mentioned TikTok videos. There's a whole series of TikTok videos, and they're marriage videos about being petty in your marriage. And while we can laugh at some of those things that people kind of put out there about being petty, it really is kind of our imitating life, right? It's to help us reflect on what we're doing and why we're doing it. Are you just trying to make him feel bad? Are you just trying to get back at her? Are you just trying to make your point? Are you just trying to be stubborn? To what end?
Yeah. So our apprentice, listen, man, these are just T-shirts. I mean, you said it yourself, what God has has brought together, let no man put asunder, right? This is Team Perry, man, all day. All day. But Ron said, what apprentice said, he's just agreeing with you, close the gap, draw near to one another, right? Because that's ultimately what we're called to do. Our love should compel us to do that, right?
Yeah.
Ron said, I never feel like I need space because we figured out a way to listen and focus on what the other person needs from us. And so the question is, Ron, how does everyone figure that out? Because there are a lot of couples who have not figured it out.
Yeah.
Right. And sometimes, hopefully what we're talking about here helps us to get to a place where we don't have to lose something in order to learn this lesson, which is what a lot of us do.
Yeah.
It's like we watch people lose all the time, lose their relationships, their happiness, their everything. Right. And we don't get it.
Yeah.
So how do we look at Ryan and Linda and get it? Right. How do we look at the person that we love and get it and understand that this person is the person that this is my person, right? This is my covenant partner. This is my wife.
Yeah.
My husband, right? How do we do that?
Yeah.
And make that person as somebody just alluded to, like, kind of quoting Lisa, right? Make this marriage the most important thing.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. And, one thing I think Jessica said that God really kind of gets her attention and kind of calls her on the carpet on that, right? When we get into that space, when we get into that place of needing space, or we feel that we need distance, or our relationship is strained, and we want to be petty, or we want to be vindictive, or whatever it is, right? I would just say, if you can take a moment to really kind of reflect on how you can love your spouse better. Right. So what she said was, God will have her do something nice for her husband, like make him some ice cream, or his favorite meal, or whatever it is. Right. At that time, we're not thinking about how do I love him better. So I love that you shared that. So maybe that's another thing to throw in there. So we're giving you a whole lot of challenges and a whole lot of homework this week, but maybe in those moments, the question is, how do I love them better? It's not, how do I get back at them? How do I make them pay? How do I make my point? How do I make sure I'm right? I always enjoy when somebody quotes one of us, and it was, do you want to be right, or do you want to be married?
Yeah.
That's a good one. But, again, just kind of taking a couple of seconds, not 3 weeks, to just be intentional and declare that I'm not leaving, that nobody's leaving, that we are going to work through this. We are better together.
And I'm about to drop another little self-check thing in the chat before we get out of here. And I'm dropping y'all some things you probably heard of.
Yeah.
I want to make it easy for you, right? Because something as simple as starting here, it can make the difference in the conversation that you have and your decision, right? How much time you want to be separate, or do you want to spend the time that you have loving each other? Because we don't know how much time we have, y'all. We don't. And so we treat life as if we have all the time in the world. We have no idea. And I can tell you now, I know a lot of people personally who wish they had spent those minutes differently. All right. So 1 Corinthians 13, 4-7. This is, love is patient, kind, does not envy, doesn't boast, is not proud, doesn't dishonor others, is not self-seeking, it's not easily angered, keeps no record of wrongs. Right. And take a look at that before you decide, I need my time and my space. Take a look at that, both of you, and see if maybe that's what you're living up to, if that's what you're doing. And if you're not, maybe it's time to come back together and see if you can.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. So I think that's all the time we have for tonight. But we knew this one was going to be in 2 parts. So just in case you came in a little bit later, if you are in a relationship where you decided to separate for a period of time and it benefited you, we'd love to hear you share a little bit of that and hear your story of how it worked out. And we invite you to join us next Monday to talk about it. You can DM us, or you could drop it in there. I think Kel already said sign him up.
Yeah.
Or if you went through a separation and it didn't work out, we'd love to hear from you too. So we always appreciate that you guys take some time out on Mondays just to spend a little time with us. Thank you for everything that you shared, all of the wisdom that you're sharing with others. You're helping somebody out there, and we appreciate you.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we do. And so we're going to go ahead and get you out of here. We'll pray real quick.
Yeah.
And I think that's it. Yeah. Heavenly Father, we just come tonight just thanking you. Thank you for who you are. Thank you for blessing us to be here tonight. We just ask that you look after all these couples. Bless their marriages, bless their homes and their families. As always, we ask you to help us to all forgive more quickly, God, and to love more readily, to just stand back and wait for you to show up, God, but keep you at the center of everything that we do. And we'll be sure to give you the honor and the praise. We thank you. We love you. We pray these and other blessings in your name. Amen.
Amen.
All right, y'all. Take it easy.
Yeah, that's good.
We will see you next week.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Lori. And thank you, Dr. Walters. We appreciate you all. You guys have a great week.
Thank y'all. Love you. Bye.
Oh, yeah. Oh yeah, oh yeah. It's your boy JC. I'm in the mood, love, yeah. Lately I've been constantly thinking about you, babe. You drive me crazy, yeah. And girl, I want it. Got me all up in my feelings. Oh, what a feeling, yeah. I knew the first time I laid eyes on you that you would be here forever. I'm not being arrogant, and I still can't take my eyes off you. 'Cause you made me better, so much better. I'm in the mood to love you for a lifetime. I'm in the mood to love you for a lifetime, baby. I love your kindness, I love your confidence. Ooh, you're the finest. So glad you're mine, yeah, yeah, yeah. And I don't wanna be with nobody else. Give me your love, that's all the wealth I need. Baby, you're priceless to me, yeah. To love you for a lifetime. I'm in the mood to love you for a lifetime, yeah, yeah, yeah. Whoa. Promise I'ma be around, I'ma always hold you down. Won't you come and hold me now? Won't you come and hold me now? I just got a new coupe, yeah, I know I got a roof, but I always keep it down with you, yeah. And I know they see, girl, you're my queen, and beauty speaks for itself loud and clear, yeah. So throw it in the air. It's the sweetest sound to follow my ear. And I want the world to know I'll love you forever. And that's a long time, babe. But I got time for you, baby. I'm in the mood. Ooh, for a lifetime. I'm in the mood to love you, yeah. For a lifetime, baby. Ooh, yeah. For a lifetime, oh, for a lifetime, yeah, yeah.